the city, baby, and us in testicles. You wanna try, baby.
The moon hid behind a shroud of clouds, as if the heavens themselves mourned. Darian stood on the deep edge of the cliff, overlooking the violent sea that mirrored the turmoil in his soul. His hands clenched into fists, nails digging into his palms, as he fought the urge to let out a guttural howl that could wake the very gods of old. But no. He had no right. His eyes, golden like the wolf within him, glistened with unshed tears. In werewolf tradition, the moon was a source of celebration and a symbol of their unbreakable spirit. Yet, tonight, it served as a bitter reminder of the love he had lost. The soulmate ripped away from him. Lyra. The moon betrays me, just as fate has. He whispered to the wind, as if the elements themselves were his confidants. A gust of wind swept past him, almost like a caress from a ghostly hand. Lyra's scent seemed to fill the air for a brief moment. Wild lavender and fresh rain. His knees almost buckled at the memory, the sensation was too hauntingly real. He closed his eyes, seeing her face as vividly as if she were standing before him. Her smile that could light up the darkest of nights, her eyes a matching shade of golden amber, filled with love and an untamed spirit. A spirit that had been snuffed out all too soon. Lyra, you are my only Luna. Her name was a prayer, a curse, and a lament all rolled into one. The wind howled in response, as if sharing his grief. The trees rustled, and the leaves whispered secrets he dared not confess. Secrets of a vow made in the depths of despair. A vow of vengeance against those who had taken her from him, a vow that sealed the fates of families for generations, unaware of the calamity that would befall them. His heart twisted at the thought. What would Lyra say if she knew the path he was treading? Would she look at him with those loving eyes, or would they be filled with disdain? He opened his eyes and looked up, almost pleading for an answer. But the moon remained hidden, its light withheld, as if condemning him for even considering straying from the path of love and light that Lyra had always embodied. "Forgive me, my love," he murmured. "I'm not sure whether I should honor you with love or avenge you with wrath. Both burn within me, each a conflicting but inseparable part of my love for you." With a deep, shuddering breath, he turned away from the cliff, his silhouette blending with the dark forest behind him. But as he retreated into the shadows, his eyes glinted with a desire as hard as diamonds. "Your killers will not know peace," he vowed softly, each word tinged with an icy finality. "And neither will I," Darian added. As he disappeared into the night, the moon finally broke free from its cloudy prison, casting a solitary beam of light onto the cliff, as if mourning the soul that was lost in the hearts that would soon be broken. Spring had always been Elara's favorite season. It was a time of rebirth, a time for her to bond, meet new friends, and endless possibilities. As she stepped out of the carriage, her eyes widened at the sight of the grand ballroom before her, adorned with twinkling chandeliers and velvet drapes. "This is it, my first social season," she thought, excitement bubbling within her. Elara had been waiting for this moment since she was a little girl, listening to her mother's tales of elegant balls and whirlwind romances. It was a rite of passage in her world. A world far removed from the shadowy forests and ancient legends that Darian called home. Her gown, a delicate shade of lavender, swished around her ankles as she made her way into the bustling ballroom. Men in tailored suits and women in extravagant gowns filled the room, but Elara felt strangely alone. "Isn't it wonderful?" Her best friend, Clara, whispered as they stood on the outskirts of the dance floor. "It's like a dream," Elara replied, but her eyes betrayed a distant yearning. "What's wrong?" Clara asked, detecting her friend's subtle shift in mood. "I don't know, it's as if a part of me is missing." Elara hesitated, searching for words. Before Clara could respond, a sudden hush fell over the room. A mysterious, almost visible energy seemed to sweep through the crowd. Elara's heart inexplicably began to race, as if responding to an unspoken call. And then he entered. Even without seeing his face, Elara felt an inexplicable pull. A gravitational force that defied reason. She turned, her eyes meeting a gaze as golden as the harvest moon. It was him. It was as if the room had transformed into a magnetic field, drawing her towards him. As he made his way towards her, Elara's anticipation grew, her curiosity piqued by the enigmatic stranger, the man from the rumors. the enigmatic head of the Lauretti family, who had shunned society for years. Darian Lauretti. Their eyes locked, and for a fleeting moment, Elara felt as if she'd found that missing note in her life's melody. But as quickly as it came, the moment passed. Darian broke the gaze and moved through the crowd, leaving Elara standing there, her heart pounding in her chest. What just happened? Clara asked, bewildered by her friend's reaction. I don't know. Elara whispered, still reeling from the electric charge of the eye contact. But I think I already found what I want now. As the orchestra resumed its lively tune, Elara couldn't shake off the feeling that she had just crossed paths with her destiny. Or perhaps, her doom. The grand ballroom was a dazzling array of colors and sounds, but Darian was indifferent to it all. He moved through the crowd like a shadow, his golden eyes scanning faces that he held no interest in. As he stepped into a secluded corner, his beta butler, Marcus, approached him discreetly. Alpha, everything is going as planned. The Thompsons' debts are accumulating, and soon they will have no choice but to comply. Darian's lips curled into a bitter smile. Excellent. The sooner we get this over with, the better. Darian said. Marcus hesitated. You've never attended these social events, Alpha. May I ask what changed? Darian's eyes darkened. I've spent years avoiding humans, Marcus. Their greed, their treachery. It cost me everything. Now it's time for them to pay. Before Marcus could respond, a figure across the room caught Darian's attention. It was her. The young woman whose eyes had met his earlier. Elara. She was laughing, her eyes twinkling like stars, utterly oblivious to the storm that was about to engulf her life. A strange sensation stirred within him. For a moment, he was entranced by her laughter and her innocence. But then reality crashed back, filling him with a resentment so deep it was almost evident. That's her, isn't it? Marcus followed his gaze. Elara Thompson, the daughter of the family you're targeting. Yes. Darian's voice was laced with a chilling firmness. She's the final piece of this wretched puzzle. Once she's ensnared, I'll make sure her family is obliterated, down to the very last branch of their family tree. Marcus looked at him with a mixture of awe and concern. You're playing with fire, Alpha. Are you certain this is the path you want to tread? Darian looked back at Elara one last time. She was still laughing, blissfully unaware of the dark cloud looming on her horizon. His eyes narrowed. Certainty is a luxury I can't afford, he said, turning away. But vengeance is a promise I intend to keep. As he left the ballroom, he couldn't shake off the image of Elara's radiant smile. But it didn't matter. Soon enough, her world would crumble, and he would be the one holding the wrecking ball. Amidst this spectacle, Elara found herself entranced by a different kind of beauty. One that was darker, more mysterious. Darian Lauretti. Since their first encounter, his visage had haunted her thoughts incessantly. He was a paradox of light and shadow. His hair was a raven-black waterfall, a stark contrast to his golden eyes that held emotions she can't fathom. Even his scene, an intoxicating blend of cedarwood and a strange, wild musk, clung to her senses, unwilling to be forgotten. As she stood at the outskirts of the ballroom, she overheard snippets of whispered conversations that made her heart sink. Did you hear? Darian Lauretti became the head of his family under the most tragic circumstances. Oh, you mean the tale of patricide? How he allegedly killed his own father and stepmother. Yes, they say he's not just a billionaire but a ruthless killer. Merciless, powerful, and feared even among his own kind. Elara felt a shiver run down her spine. Could the man she found so irresistibly alluring really be capable of such atrocities? As she retired to her chamber that night, Elara found her thoughts stubbornly fixated on Darian. His features replayed in her mind like a mesmerizing portrait, his chiseled jawline that looked like it was carved from marble, the ripple of muscles that hinted at untamed strength beneath his tailored suit. His commanding presence, and those golden eyes that seemed to see right through her, they were all imprinted on her soul. She recalled the moment their eyes had met. It was as if he had looked past her facade and glimpsed her innermost desires. It was thrilling yet terrifying, much like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing that one step could either lead to exhilarating freedom or a fatal fall. And then there were his lips, thin but full enough to tease the imagination, leaving her pondering how they would feel pressed against her own. She shook her head, trying to dispel the image, but it lingered, like a haunting melody. Darian Lauretti was a paradox, a blend of darkness and allure that she couldn't quite reconcile. But one thing was certain, her attraction to him was as undeniable as it was unsettling. As she drifted into sleep, a single thought solidified in her mind: she was undeniably, irrevocably captivated by Darian Lauretti. But could a man so steeped in darkness ever bring light into her life? Or would he pull her into the abyss, sealing both their fates in eternal night? The sound of hurried footsteps and muffled words that clashed with one another woke Elara up. As she sat up and rubbed the sleep out of her eyes, she pulled back the curtains on her four-poster bed and was stunned by what she saw. Their beautiful Thompson house was being taken apart piece by piece. She quickly put on her robe and ran down the hallway, her heart beating loudly in her chest. What in the world is going on? She asked herself. She tried to get one of the workers to stop. Mrs. Higgins, Mrs. Higgins. Elara cried and grabbed the arm of the old housekeeper as she ran by with a bunch of porcelain figures in her arms. What's happening? Mrs. Higgins tried not to look at Elara because her face was red with worry. I'm so sorry, Miss Thompson, she said in a whisper, her eyes full of tears. They told us to do it. Elara was getting more and more upset. Why were people being so sneaky? She needed to know what was going on right away. She found her mother in her bedroom, where her face was pale and her eyes were red from crying. Mother, Elara began, her voice trembling, what's happening? Her mother, Eleanor Thompson, looked up, her eyes filled with a sorrow Elara had never seen before. Oh, my darling, she murmured, reaching out to take Elara's hand. It's all gone horribly wrong. Elara felt a chill run down her spine. The business, she ventured, thinking of her father's once thriving textile enterprise. Eleanor nodded, tears streaming down her face. Your father tried to expand too quickly. He took loans, thinking the business would flourish. But it didn't. Dread settled in Elara's stomach. So, we're broke, Eleanor whispered. We have nothing left. But our home? Elara exclaimed, her voice rising in panic. Surely they can't take our home? Eleanor shook her head, wiping away her tears. The bank has taken possession of everything. We have to vacate by the end of the week. Elara felt as if the ground had been pulled from under her feet. Their beautiful home, filled with memories, was being taken away. Father, she murmured, realizing he would be in his study. I need to speak with Father. Rushing through the grand hallways, Elara pushed open the door to her father's study. There, she found William Thompson, her once formidable father, hunched over his desk, his face etched with lines of defeat. He was signing away their life, document by document. Father, Elara whispered, taking in the sight. William looked up, his eyes filled with pain. Elara, he murmured. I'm so sorry. A heavy silence enveloped the room, broken only by the distant sounds of their belongings being carted away. Elara finally spoke, her voice filled with desperation. There has to be something we can do. Anything. William shook his head, setting down his pen. There's one possible solution, he began hesitantly. But it comes with its own set of challenges. Elara leaned forward, her eyes wide. Tell me. The Lauretti family, William murmured, his voice filled with a mixture of hope and dread. Fear flashed in Eleanor's eyes, who had followed Elara into the study. William, no, she whispered. Not the Lauretti. Elara frowned, trying to recall where she'd heard that name. The Lauretti? She echoed, puzzled. William nodded, his face grave. Darian Lauretti. He's one of the wealthiest men in the city and has shown interest in our business before. But he's also rumored to be dangerous, Eleanor added, wringing her hands. Elara pondered this. She had heard whispers about Darian Lauretti, the dashing but enigmatic billionaire with a dark side. But they were in dire straits. They had no room to be choosy. We have no choice, Eleanor, William said, his voice firm. I'll arrange a meeting. Elara nodded, determination settling in. I'll come with you, she declared. Perhaps Mr. Lauretti and I can come to some sort of understanding. Eleanor's face paled further, her eyes widening in alarm. Elara, no. It's too dangerous. Elara straightened her shoulders. These are desperate times, Mother. We must be brave. William sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. Very well, he murmured. We'll meet with Darian Lauretti. But we must be cautious. As Elara left her father's study, she couldn't help but feel a mix of fear and anticipation. Their fate was now intertwined with the enigmatic Darian Lauretti, and only time would reveal the true cost of their desperation. Even though it was getting dark, the Lauretti house stood out because of its size and grandeur. It was in the middle of the city and showed how powerful and wealthy the Lauretti family was. It was a shining example of wealth that many people wanted. William Thompson fiddled with his tie as he and Elara climbed the long marble stairs. Their steps were heard in the distance, which made them realize how serious the situation was that they were about to face. Elara whispered to William, "Father," as her fingers lightly touched his arm. "Are we doing the right thing?" William sighed and looked straight ahead at the huge wood doors. "I'm not sure, honey. But we have no other choice." When they got to the doors, 2 butlers opened them and showed them an opulent lobby with gold and crystal. The sight made Elara gasp for air. But what really caught her eye was the guy standing at the far end, whose silhouette was framed by the large windows behind him. Lauretti, Darian. His dark hair, neatly combed back, and piercing gold eyes gave him an air of authority. A predatory aura surrounded him, one of power and danger. As he stepped into the light, his sharp features softened ever so slightly upon seeing Elara. "Mr. Thompson," Darian began, his voice a deep baritone, "thank you for coming. And this must be your daughter, Elara. The city's latest sensation." Elara's cheeks flushed at his comment. "Mr. Lauretti," she replied, her voice steady despite the rapid beating of her heart. Darian's gaze lingered on her for a moment before he motioned for them to sit. "Please, let's discuss the matter at hand." They settled into the plush chairs, and Darian got straight to the point. "I understand your business is in trouble. And I'm willing to help." William leaned forward, hope evident in his eyes. "You have our gratitude, Mr. Lauretti. We're in a dire situation." Darian steepled his fingers, his gaze sharp. "I'm prepared to offer you a loan, Mr. Thompson. But there will be conditions." William nodded eagerly. "Of course. We're willing to discuss terms." The next hour was a dance of numbers and conditions. But as Darian laid out his terms, it became evident they were designed to be nearly impossible to fulfill. "And should you fail to meet any payment," Darian was saying, "the collateral will be your mansion and all its assets. Additionally, a personal guarantee from a member of your family." Elara's heart raced. She had a sinking feeling about what Darian was insinuating. "What sort of personal guarantee?" she ventured. Darian's gaze fixed on her, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "A union, Miss Thompson. A marriage." The room grew silent, the weight of his proposal hanging in the air. Elara's eyes widened in shock, while William's face turned a shade paler. "You can't be serious," Elara finally managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. Darian leaned back, his eyes never leaving hers. "I've always admired the Thompson family, their legacy. It would be a shame to see it crumble. This union would be beneficial for both parties." William cleared his throat, struggling to find his voice. "Mr. Lauretti, we're grateful for your offer, but this is unexpected." Darian raised an eyebrow. "Unexpected, perhaps. But it's the best offer you'll receive, I assure you." Elara's mind raced. She was trapped, cornered by a predator who had been stalking his prey for far too long. "I need time to think," she said, her voice shaky. Darian nodded. "Of course. Take the night. But remember, the clock is ticking." As William and Elara left the Lauretti mansion, the weight of the situation pressed down on them. Things moved quickly the next morning. The Grand Thompson estate was now filled with oppressive silence. With each tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway, it seemed like the time they had left was getting shorter. Elara went to the greenhouse to find comfort in the roses and lilies that her mother loved so much. Even though the roses smelled nice, the burden on her heart didn't change much. "Who is Elara?" A soft voice broke her train of thought. It was her father, William. His face, which had always shown strength and drive, looked worn and defeated. She ran to him and grabbed his hands. "Father, we don't have to do this. There must be something else we can do." William sighed deeply. "I've looked, my dear. Every door seems to be closed. Mr. Lauretti's offer is the only lifeline we have. But at what cost?" Elara whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "He's asking for my hand in marriage, father. It's as if I'm being sold to the highest bidder." William pulled her into an embrace, his voice filled with sorrow. "I never wanted this for you. You deserve happiness, love, not to be trapped in a marriage of convenience." They stood like that for a few moments, taking solace in each other's presence. Finally, pulling back, William looked into Elara's eyes, his own filled with tears. "I've decided to sign the contract." Elara's heart plummeted. She had known this moment was coming, but hearing the words out loud was a different kind of pain. "Father, are you sure?" He nodded, his face resolute. "It's the only way to save our family and our legacy. I can't let everything we've built crumble." Reality settled heavily on Elara's shoulders. "Then let's face it together," she said, taking a deep breath. The two made their way to the grand sitting room, where the contract awaited. The intricate document, with its gold-embossed edges, lay on the table, an inkwell and quill beside it. It looked so innocuous, yet it held the power to change their lives forever. William hesitated for a moment, its pressing down on him. Then, with a deep breath, he picked up the quill, dipped it in ink, and with a steady hand, signed the document. As the ink dried, sealing their fate, Elara does not know what to feel. She would face this challenge head-on, for the sake of her family. Just then, a soft knock sounded at the door. The butler entered, a silver tray in hand. "A letter for Miss Thompson," he said, offering it to Elara. She took the letter, recognizing the elegant seal of the Lauretti family. Breaking it open, she quickly scanned the contents. "Mr. Lauretti is having dinner with me tomorrow night," she said in a calm voice. "He wants to talk about our upcoming marriage." William looked at her with his eyes filled with pain. "Elara, there's no need to," she stopped him by lightly touching his arm. "Father, I'll go. We've decided on this, and I'll make sure it happens." She also tried to make light of the situation by saying, "Maybe Mr. Lauretti isn't as bad as the rumors say." The dining room of the Lauretti mansion was a lavish affair, with high ceilings embellished with intricate frescoes and crystal chandeliers that twinkled like far-off stars. Under the soft lighting, the fine ceramics and silverware on the long mahogany table sparkled. But the beauty of the room didn't make Elara feel any better. She felt like she didn't belong, like a single rose in a huge desert. Darian sat at the head of the table, the flickering candlelight casting deep shadows on his chiseled face. His expression was inscrutable, and his posture was rigid. Every inch of him screamed power and control. This was his domain, and she was merely a visitor. Elara cleared her throat, attempting to break the stifling silence. "Mr. Lauretti, thank you for inviting me to dinner." Darian merely nodded, his icy eyes fixed on her. "Miss Thompson, let's not waste time on pleasantries. We both know why you're here." Elara swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his gaze. "Very well. Let's discuss the terms of our arrangement." A faint smirk played on Darian's lips. "Straight to the point. I like that." A server entered the room, placing plates of exquisite food before them. But the rich aromas did little to tempt Elara's appetite. Her focus was solely on the man before her. "As you're aware," Darian began, taking a sip of his wine, "I've offered to alleviate your family's financial burdens. In return, I expect certain concessions." Elara took a deep breath, steadying herself. "And those would be?" Darian leaned forward, the candlelight illuminating his sharp features. "Your hand in marriage." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Elara's heart was beating fast as she realized what was happening. "You make it sound like a business transaction." Darian's eyes never wavered. "Isn't it? I provide the funds, and in return, I get a wife. It's a fair exchange." Elara's hands clenched in her lap. She had expected this, but hearing it so bluntly was a different matter. "And what if I refuse?" Darian's gaze darkened. That's not an option, Miss Thompson. Your family's fate rests in my hands. And I always get what I want. A surge of defiance rose within Elara. And what if I'm not the docile wife you expect? For a moment, a flicker of amusement crossed Darian's face. I have no doubt you'll be a challenge. But I enjoy a challenge. Their dinner continued in a tense silence, the atmosphere thick with unspoken words. As the plates were cleared away, Darian rose from his chair, extending his hand. Shall we finalize our agreement? Elara paused, and her mind was a battlefield. She had no other option. With a sigh of resignation, she put her hand in his. His touch was cold. As they moved to his study, Darian's demeanor shifted. He seemed almost contemplative. You know, Miss Thompson, he began, his voice softer. Under different circumstances, I might have genuinely courted you. Elara looked up in surprise, seeing a hint of vulnerability in his eyes. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by his usual cold facade. But these are our circumstances, he continued, and we must play the cards we're dealt. They reached the study, and Darian retrieved the contract from his desk. All that's left is your signature, he said, offering her a pen. Elara took a moment, her gaze fixed on the document. Then, with a deep breath, she signed her name, sealing her fate. Darian watched her with a strange look in his eyes. For a brief moment, it seemed as if he wanted to say something to reassure her. But he remained silent. As Elara left the Lauretti mansion, she felt a mix of fear and thrill. She was bound to a man she barely knew, a man who was both her savior and her captor. The vast Thompson mansion had never felt so cold. Every corner, every room, held memories of happier times. Yet, now, it felt like a cage, each tick of the grandfather clock echoing the impending doom. Elara stood in her bedroom, staring at her reflection. The luxurious white gown, the delicate lace veil, all seemed like trappings of a life she didn't recognize. The soft rustle of fabric announced her mother's entrance. Eleanor Thompson looked at her daughter with a heart full of feelings she couldn't say out loud. Elara, she whispered, you look beautiful. Elara blinked away her tears, and her voice shook. Elara took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. What if I'm not strong enough, Mother? What if I can't bear the weight of this decision? Eleanor cupped her daughter's face, her voice firm yet gentle. You are a Thompson. You are resilient. And no matter what, remember that you're never alone. The moment was cut short by a soft knock on the door. The maid came in with a pale face. Miss Thompson, the guests have arrived. It's time. Time. That scary thing that is always there. Elara felt a tightening in her chest. Every step she took toward the grand stairs made her feel like she was marching towards something she didn't know. Everything seemed unreal, from the soft chatter of the guests to the sweet smell of the flowers. As she descended the stairs, she caught a glimpse of him. Darian Lauretti. Tall, imposing, a stark contrast in his black suit. His piercing golden eyes met hers, and for a moment, the world faded away. There was a depth in his gaze, a hint of something she couldn't quite decipher. Was it admiration? Desire? Or merely the satisfaction of a well-executed plan? The ceremony was a blur. The priest's words, the exchange of vows, it all felt like a dream. And as Darian slipped the ring onto her finger, sealing their union, Elara felt a mix of fear, resignation, and a strange sense of anticipation. The reception was equally disorienting. Guests offered their congratulations, their smiles masking the underlying whispers and speculations. And through it all, Darian never left her side. He was always there, but he kept a cool and detached attitude. As the night wore on, Elara found herself on the Lauretti estate's balcony, seeking a moment of solitude. The cool night breeze played with her veil, the soft glow of the moon casting shadows on the gardens below. She was so lost in her thoughts that she didn't hear him approach. A penny for your thoughts? Darian's deep voice broke the silence. Elara jumped, and her heart beat fast. Mr. Lauretti, she said in a low voice, I didn't hear you. Darian leaned against the railing, his gaze fixed on the horizon. It's a beautiful night, he commented, his voice devoid of emotion. Elara nodded, struggling to find the right words. Yes, it is. They stood in silence for a few moments, each lost in their own world. Finally, Darian turned to her, his expression inscrutable. Are you afraid, Mrs. Lauretti? Elara met his gaze, her voice barely above a whisper. Terrified. Darian's eyes shifted into a darker shade. As you should, he whispered. What Darian said left Elara frozen. The grandeur of the Lauretti mansion was undeniably breathtaking. Every corner was a testament to centuries of wealth and power. Yet, for Elara, it felt like an exquisite cage. The gleaming marble floors echoed her footsteps, making her hyper-aware of every move. The reception was in full swing. The grand ballroom was abuzz with laughter and conversation, the melodies of a live orchestra setting a lively backdrop. But amidst the sea of elegantly dressed guests, Elara felt starkly out of place. Ladies in luxurious gowns, dripping in jewels, huddled in small groups, their conversations punctuated with soft giggles and furtive glances in her direction. Every whisper, every sidelong look, felt like a dagger to her heart. She was the talk of the evening, the human bride of the formidable Darian Lauretti. The novelty of her presence was undeniable, but so was the underlying animosity. Clara, sensing her unease, sidled up to her. Ignore them, Elara, she whispered in a fierce tone. Their opinions don't matter. Elara attempted a smile, but it felt forced. It's hard to ignore when I feel like a fish out of water. Clara squeezed her hand reassuringly. It's just one evening. You'll get through this. Just then, a group of ladies approached them, their smiles too sweet, their eyes sharp with curiosity. Miss Thompson, the leader of the pack, a tall blonde with a haughty expression, began. Or should I say, Mrs. Lauretti? Congratulations on your wedding. Elara nodded, searching for words. Thank you, lady. Call me Cecilia, the blonde replied with a smirk. I must say, it's quite the surprise to see someone like you become the new Lady Lauretti. Elara stiffened, sensing the veiled insult. Every marriage has its surprises, she replied evenly. Cecilia laughed, the sound devoid of warmth. Indeed. Well, we just wanted to welcome you to our world. It can be quite overwhelming for someone like you. Before Elara could reply, Clara stepped in, her voice dripping with sweetness. Thank you, Cecilia, for your warm welcome. Elara is lucky to have such caring acquaintances. Cecilia's eyes narrowed, but she merely smiled. Of course. Enjoy the evening. With that, the group walked away, leaving Elara feeling even more isolated. Taking a deep breath, Elara turned to Clara. Thank you. I don't know what I would do without you. Clara hugged her tight. You're not alone, Elara. Remember that. The evening wore on, a blur of faces and conversations. Elara played her part, smiling and nodding, all the while feeling like an imposter in a world she didn't belong. As the clock struck midnight, signaling the end of the festivities, Elara felt a weight lift off her shoulders. The ordeal was over, at least for now. Darian approached her, his expression unreadable. You mind your own business, there will be a set of rules in this house and you will abide, he commented, his voice devoid of emotion. Darian came close, towering over her. Are you gonna cry now? He said in a sarcastic tone. Save your tears, this house needs a strong mistress. Elara met his gaze, her own eyes flashing with defiance. I'm stronger than I look. Darian's lips twitched, the hint of a smile playing at the corners. I never doubted that. The luxurious chambers that were now to be Elara's were a sight to behold. Rich drapes of burgundy velvet framed the tall windows, glistening in the soft glow of the candlelight. The bed was a masterpiece, carved from dark mahogany, adorned with silken sheets that felt cool against the skin. A lot of maids flew around making sure everything was just right. They put out a beautiful nightgown with fine lacework and soft cloth that looked like it would be comfortable. They filled the bath with rose-scented water, steam rising in gentle swirls. Everything was done to ensure the bride's comfort on her first night. Elara, however, felt anything but comforted. The weight of the night, including the looks and comments, had taken its toll. And now, the thought of the night ahead hung over them like a ghost. She attempted to calm her racing heart as she entered the bath and was immediately enveloped by the warm water. This was just another challenge, another hurdle. She would face it with the same optimism that had seen her through every other challenge in her life. Dressed in the nightgown, her hair brushed till it shone, Elara approached the bed. The soft glow of the candles, the petals strewn across the sheets, it was all so romantic. Yet, a sense of foreboding gnawed at her. The door to the chambers swung open, revealing Darian. He looked every bit the formidable Alpha, his tall frame dominating the space. Their eyes met, and for a moment, Elara saw a flicker of something in his gaze. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. Without a word, he walked over to a table, pouring himself a drink. The amber liquid glinted in the glass, and all that could be heard was the ice clinking. Elara cleared her throat, breaking the silence. "Darian?" He didn't look up, his voice cold. "You should get some rest, Elara. Tomorrow is another long day." Confusion marred her features. "Aren't you joining me?" Darian took a sip of his drink, finally meeting her gaze. His eyes were icy, devoid of warmth. "I have no interest in sharing a bed with you, Elara. Our union is one of convenience, nothing more." Elara's heart constricted, his words cutting deep. "I see," she whispered, struggling to keep her composure. Darian set his glass down, his tone even colder. "Let's be clear, Elara. I will never love you. This is a marriage in name only. The sooner you understand that, the easier it will be." With that, he turned on his heel, leaving Elara alone in the vast room, her world crumbling around her. She sank onto the bed, the silken sheets offering no solace. Tears pricked her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had faced challenges before, and she would face this one. But for tonight, she would allow herself to feel the pain, the sting of rejection. Morning dawned bright and clear, casting a soft golden hue on the vast Lauretti estate. But within the walls of the mansion, the atmosphere was far from serene. Elara sat at the breakfast table, the grandeur of the dining room only accentuating her sense of isolation. The long, mahogany table was laden with an array of dishes, their delicious aromas wafting through the air. Still, she didn't feel hungry. The events of the night before weighed on her, and Darian's cold words kept playing over and over in her thoughts. As she picked at her food, the tall doors swung open, revealing Darian. His demeanor cool and detached. Without a word, he took the seat at the head of the table, his golden eyes fixed on the morning paper. Elara cleared her throat, attempting to break the tension. "Good morning, Darian." He merely nodded, not looking up. "Morning." A heavy silence settled between them, punctuated only by the clinking of cutlery. Elara took a deep breath, mustering the courage to speak. "About last night." Darian cut her off with an icy tone. "There's no need to discuss it further. What's done is done." Elara blinked, taken aback by his bluntness. "I just thought." Darian set down his paper, fixing her with a piercing gaze. "Elara, there are certain rules you'll need to follow while you're here." She frowned, confused. "Rules?" He nodded, his expression unreadable. "Firstly, you'll refrain from leaving the estate without my permission. It's for your own safety." Elara bristled, her blue eyes flashing with defiance. "I'm not a prisoner, Darian." He leaned forward, his voice low. "This is my world, Elara. A world you know nothing about. I won't risk your safety." She took a deep breath, struggling to keep her composure. "And the other rules?" Darian sat back with a cool demeanor. "You'll avoid unnecessary interactions with the staff. They're here to do their job, not engage in idle chatter. And lastly, our situation will remain private. No discussions, no questions. Is that understood?" With a mixture of rage and disbelief, Elara's heart raced. "I may be your wife in name, Darian, but I'm not your puppet. You can't control every aspect of my life." Darian's gaze hardened, his voice firm. "This is not up for debate, Elara. These are the rules, and you will follow them." Elara met his gaze, her own eyes flashing with defiance. "We'll see about that." And with that, she pushed back her chair, leaving the room with her head held high. As the door closed behind her, Darian leaned back, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. For all her defiance, there was no denying the spark between them. The only sound in the huge halls of the Lauretti house was the soft patter of Elara's feet. She was going to the library, where she hoped to find comfort in books. Even though the house was beautiful, it was too big and grand for her, and she longed for a quiet moment to think. She was almost there, but a loud voice stopped her in her tracks. It was clear that it came from Darian because his voice was angry. "No excuses. I expect results, not failures," he thundered. Elara hesitated, torn between the urge to intervene and the wisdom of staying out of it. But curiosity got the better of her, and she edged closer, peering through a slightly ajar door. Inside, Darian stood at his imposing desk, his tall frame rigid with anger. Opposite him was a young man, his features taut with anxiety. He was one of the lower-ranking members of Darian's pack, and by the looks of it, he had borne the brunt of the Alpha's wrath. "I apologize, Alpha," the young man stammered. "It won't happen again." Did he just call Darian Alpha? Elara spoke to herself in a whisper. She quickly put her hand over her mouth to stop herself from letting out a gasp. Only those creatures call themselves Alpha. The man she had just married was a werewolf, she realized. Darian's golden eyes blazed, his voice dripping with contempt. "You were right. It won't. Because if it does, you'll answer to me." The threat in his voice was unmistakable, and the young man turned pale. "Yes, my Alpha." Darian leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "I expect nothing but the best from my pack. Remember that, Beta." With a curt nod, the young man hurriedly left the room, relief evident in his every step. Darian, meanwhile, sank into his chair, running a hand through his hair, his tension slowly dissipating. He knew that maintaining control over his pack was crucial, and he would stop at nothing to ensure their loyalty and obedience. When Elara had seen enough, she went away quietly. She knew Darian was a formidable man, but it never occurred to her that he was a werewolf. She also didn't think werewolves were real. His anger was so strong and he had so much power that it was both amazing and scary. When they sat down for dinner that night, you could feel the strain in the air. Darian's mood had changed a lot. His answers were short, and he seemed far away. Elara cleared her throat, breaking the silence. "Is everything all right, Darian?" He met her gaze, his golden eyes inscrutable. "It's my business. Nothing you need to concern yourself with." Elara bristled, her own temper flaring. "I may not be a part of your world, Darian, but I am your wife. I have a right to know." Darian's gaze hardened, a warning flashing in his eyes. "There are certain matters you're better off not knowing, Elara." She met his gaze defiantly. "Maybe. But shutting me out isn't the solution." Darian leaned back, studying her for a long moment. "You're right, how about you start by sorting out my stuff in the study?" She saw how Darian's left eyebrow raised as he studied her. Elara was quiet for a while because she thought Darian was trying to scare her. "She is not going to give up." "Many thanks. When do I begin?" Darian's jaw dropped when he heard that answer. He knew very well that the only daughter of the Thompson was a spoiled lady of the house. But he also knew that she was capable of surprising him. He decided to give her a chance and replied, "You can start tomorrow morning. Let's see if you're up for the task." The Lauretti mansion was a labyrinth of rooms and corridors, each holding secrets and stories of its own. Elara, ever the curious soul, often found herself wandering, exploring the nooks and crannies of her new home. One afternoon, as rain pattered softly against the windows, she found herself in a dimly lit hallway she hadn't ventured into before. Dust particles floated lazily in the beams of light that managed to pierce through the heavy drapes. At the end of the corridor, she noticed a door. Unlike the others, this one was made of dark oak, its surface marred by the passage of time. A heavy padlock secured it, the metal gleaming dully in the subdued light. Elara walked up to the door and touched her fingers to the cool metal of the lock. Why would a room in her own house be locked? Just as she was about to turn away, she heard a soft click. The padlock, as if by some magic, had unlocked itself. Heart racing, she hesitated for a moment before pushing the door open. The room beyond was shrouded in darkness, the heavy curtains blocking any trace of light. As her eyes adjusted, Elara realized she was in a sanctuary of memories. The walls were adorned with paintings, the subject's eyes seeming to follow her every move. In the center of the room stood a glass case, and within it lay a stunning silver pendant, its gemstone glinting mysteriously. But what caught her attention the most was a series of photographs arranged on a table. They depicted a beautiful woman with raven black hair and a smile that radiated warmth. Beside her in several of the pictures stood Darian, his usually stern features softened by genuine happiness. Tears threatened to spill as Elara realized she was looking at mementos of Darian's late mate. The love they shared was evident in every frame, every brushstroke. She was so engrossed that she didn't hear the footsteps approaching. A shadow fell across the room, and she looked up to find Darian standing at the doorway, his golden eyes clouded with pain. I'm sorry, Elara stammered. I didn't mean to intrude. Darian's voice was a mere whisper, laden with emotion. Get out of here now. Darian went in without looking at her. Darian. Elara tried to speak but was stopped by the angry uproar. Get out of my sight now, woman. Elara flinched, her heart was shattered seeing how angry Darian was. She quickly turned and hurried out of the room, tears welling in her eyes. As she made her way down the hallway, she couldn't help but wonder what had happened to Darian's mate. Elara quickly packed her things, even though her heart was full of tears she hadn't yet let out. Even though the house was big and beautiful, it felt like a prison, a gilded cage that she wanted to get out of. She couldn't take the pain of being rejected by Darian and seeing him in love with his ex-girlfriend any longer, so she decided to leave. But before she could get away, Ares, Darian's trusted beta, stood in her way. Lady Lauretti, where do you think you're going? He asked with a strong voice that was also filled with worry. Elara was surprised and said, Ares, please. I can't stay here because no one wants me. I'm no Lady Lauretti. Ares stepped forward, his eyes locking with hers. You are the lady of this house, whether you realize it or not. The pack, they've seen how you've tried with the Alpha. They respect you for it. Elara, her confusion evident, replied, Pack. Ares, what are you talking about? Ares sighed, realizing he had no choice but to reveal the truth. Lady Elara, we are werewolves, beings of the night, protectors of the forest. Elara stared at him, her mind racing. Ah, werewolves. The formidable myth. Ares nodded solemnly. It is the truth, Lady Elara. And Alpha Darian, he lost his mate, his true love, to hunters. That is the source of his pain, his anger. Elara felt a pang of sympathy, her heart aching for Darian's loss. I didn't know, she whispered. You are not to blame, Ares replied gently. But this house needs a Luna, someone to lead beside the Alpha. Elara, tears brimming in her eyes, responded, a Luna from your pack, Ares. Not me, a mere human. Ares, his voice firm, said, you underestimate your strength, your worth, Lady Elara. You've reached out to the Alpha when no one else could. Don't you see? You are meant to be here. Elara, wiping away a tear, looked at Ares. I don't know if I can be what you need, what he needs. Ares stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Lady Elara, all we ask is that you don't give up on him, on us. The heavy door to the room was thrown open with a bang as Elara and Ares talked. Darian walked in looking messy and drunk, his golden eyes burning with a fire that made Elara's heart beat faster. He stumbled towards them, his words slurring as he struggled to maintain his balance. Elara's concern grew as she noticed the disheveled state of his clothes and the strong scent of alcohol emanating from him. Ares, Darian growled, his voice dripping with authority, leave us. Ares saw how dangerous the situation was and quickly bowed and left the room, leaving Elara and Darian alone. The air grew thick with tension, the silence almost deafening. Why? Darian's voice was a low rumble, filled with anger and pain. Why were you trying to leave? Elara, gathering her courage, replied, I thought it's what you wanted. I felt unwanted. Darian's laughter was harsh, devoid of humor. You think I'd let you just walk away? After everything? Elara took a step back, her voice rising in desperation. Darian, I cannot stay where I'm not wanted. Your actions, your words, they hurt. He closed the distance between them in a flash, his strong hands gripping her arms. You don't get to decide to leave. Not now. Elara tried to pull away, but Darian's hold was unyielding. Let me go, she whispered, tears threatening to spill. Instead, he pulled her closer, his lips crashing onto hers with a force that took her by surprise. The kiss was raw, filled with pent-up emotions, anger, pain, longing. Elara, overwhelmed by the intensity, felt her resistance decline. As they broke apart, both breathing heavily, Elara whispered, Darian, what are you doing? Darian looked into Elara's eyes, his own filled with a mix of uncertainty and desire. "I don't know," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I can't let you go. Do you even know who I am?" Elara was hoping Darian would say her name. "My only mate. My love. My Luna. My Lyra," Darian said and claimed her lips. She knew it. It was his mate, not her. Elara let Darian's lips wander, as tears streamed down her cheeks. In that moment, Elara's heart shattered into a million pieces. She had hoped for a different answer, but now she knew the truth: she was not the one he truly loved. The Lauretti estate was abuzz with activity. Darian had decided to host a grand ball, inviting the creme de la creme of the supernatural world. Elara, dressed in a flowing silver gown that complemented her blue eyes, moved gracefully among the guests, exchanging pleasantries and navigating the complex dynamics of the werewolf hierarchy. However, as the evening progressed, Elara couldn't help but notice a particular woman, Isabella, who clung to Darian's side. With raven-black hair and a statuesque figure, Isabella was undeniably beautiful. But it was the intimate way she touched Darian, the knowing glances they exchanged, that set Elara's heart racing. As the night wore on, Darian, with Isabella by his side, seemed to revel in the attention, casting occasional glances in Elara's direction, gauging her reaction. Elara's heart sank as she realized that Darian's connection with Isabella was more than just a casual acquaintance. The realization brought a mix of jealousy and sadness, making it difficult for Elara to hide her true emotions. She couldn't help but wonder if there was something more between Darian and Isabella, knowing that her feelings for him were one-sided. Feeling a surge of anger and jealousy, Elara tried to compose herself. But as she watched Isabella whisper something into Darian's ear, followed by a shared laugh, something inside her snapped. Without thinking, she approached the pair, her blue eyes flashing with a newfound authority. "Isabella," she greeted coldly, "it's been a while." Isabella's smile faltered slightly, sensing the tension in Elara's voice. Darian looked between the two women, a hint of confusion in his eyes. Elara continued, her voice tinged with bitterness, "I hope you've been treating Darian well." Isabella smirked, her gaze raking over Elara. "Indeed. I see you've moved up in the world." Elara tilted her chin up, her voice firm. "Darian is my husband. I'd appreciate it if you'd keep your hands to yourself." Isabella's eyes widened in surprise, clearly not expecting such a bold response. But before she could retort, Darian stepped in, a hint of amusement in his golden eyes. "Ladies, let's not let tempers flare. This is a night of celebration, after all." Elara's gaze remained fixed on Isabella, her voice dripping with authority. "I suggest you find someone else to entertain you for the evening." Isabella, taken aback by Elara's dominance, merely nodded, quickly excusing herself. Isabella couldn't understand how a mere human made her tremble with fear. Darian watched her go, then turned to Elara, his eyes filled with a mix of surprise and admiration. "Well, that was unexpected." Elara met his gaze, her posture radiating confidence. "I won't be pushed around, Darian. Not by you, and certainly not by her." Darian chuckled, pulling her close. "I must admit, I'm impressed. The lady of the house is starting to emerge." Elara leaned into him, her voice soft. "Don't mistake my kindness for weakness, Darian. I'm stronger than you think." Darian's lips twitched, his eyes filled with newfound respect. "I'm starting to see that." The sun had barely risen, its rays piercing through the heavy curtains, casting a soft glow in Darian's study. He sat at his ornate desk, lost in thought as he went through a series of old documents. A particular document caught his attention. It was an old report detailing an incident between the Lauretti pack and a rogue group of hunters. Skimming through, a familiar name jumped out at him, sending a jolt of shock and anger coursing through his veins. "Thompson," he whispered, his voice filled with disbelief. It detailed an event where the Thompson family, though not directly involved, had provided resources and shelter to a group of hunters who had targeted werewolves. These hunters had later been responsible for the death of Darian's beloved mate. As he kept reading, the consequences of what he had just learned made his hands shake. Now, the love and trust he had started to feel for Elara clashed violently with his hate for the people who had killed his mate. He had known about the Thompson family's involvement with humans, but he had never imagined they could be connected to such a tragedy. Was it possible that Elara, the woman he was beginning to care for, was unknowingly tied to the darkest chapter of his life? As he grappled with the revelation, the door to his study creaked open, and Elara stepped in. "Darian," she began. "My mother and father are at the lobby. Can I join them for a walk?" Darian's golden eyes bore into her, a dangerous glint in them. If looks could kill, Elara could have been lying lifeless on the floor already. Elara noticed the look in Darian's face. She took a deep breath, her composure fraying. "Is everything okay?" Darian didn't answer her question. Instead, he said, "They're just in time, I have something to ask them," as he walked by her. Darian left Elara puzzled. The lobby fell into silence as Darian showed Eleanor and William the document. Fear was written all over their face, and Darian could tell the guilt just by looking at them. "It's a dark chapter in our family's history, one we deeply regret. We were misled, manipulated. By the time we realized the truth, it was too late," William said in a regretful tone. Darian's voice was low and menacing. "Your actions, however unintentional, led to the death of my mate." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry, Darian. We had no idea. And Elara, she knows nothing of this." Darian's face hardened. "She's a Thompson. She's part of this legacy." Eleanor took a step forward, desperation evident in her voice. "Please, Darian, don't punish Elara for our mistakes. She's innocent in all this." Darian looked away. "Enjoy your time with your precious daughter today. This might be the last," Darian said. William hugged Eleanor as she was shaking in fear. The Lauretti invited nearby packs to a summit. It was an annual gathering of packs that were allies of the Lauretti. While Darian was engaged in deep discussions, Elara found herself amidst a group of alpha females. A particular female named Seraphina, known for her sharp tongue and prideful nature, turned her attention to Elara. "I'm curious," she began, her voice dripping with mock sweetness, "how a mere human like you managed to ensnare the most powerful alpha." Elara's cheeks flushed, but she held her ground. "Darian's choices are his own." Seraphina laughed, circling Elara like a predator stalking its prey. "Do you truly believe you belong here, amongst us?" Another female, Lysandra, joined in, her tone equally mocking. "Perhaps she believes her human charms can compensate for what she lacks in strength." The taunts continued, each more hurtful than the last. Elara felt the weight of their words, the sting of their disdain. Just as she was about to retort, a deep growl echoed through the hall, silencing the room. Darian stood at the entrance, his golden eyes blazing with fury. He strode over, standing protectively in front of Elara. "You will show respect in my house," he commanded, his voice cold and threatening. Seraphina, not one to be easily intimidated, sneered, "Your house, perhaps. But she is not one of us." Without warning, Darian lunged at her, his form shifting in a flash to that of a massive, imposing wolf. The transformation was swift and breathtaking. His fur shimmered like liquid gold, and his eyes retained their piercing intensity. The message was clear: challenge him, and face the consequences. Seraphina, taken aback, shifted into her wolf form, readying herself for a confrontation. But as she met Darian's gaze, the defiance in her eyes wavered. With a final growl, Darian made his dominance known, forcing Seraphina to lower her head in submission. The room remained silent, the tension was evident. Darian shifted back to his human form, his gaze never leaving Seraphina. "Let this be a lesson to all. Elara is under my protection." Seraphina, with her pride wounded, retreated with a huff, Lysandra following closely behind. Darian turned to Elara, his expression softening. "Are you all right?" Elara, still reeling from the display of power, nodded. "Thank you." He studied her for a moment, his eyes searching hers. The rays of the afternoon sun streamed through the gaps in the curtains, illuminating the Thompson family library. Elara, trying to distract herself from the tumultuous events of recent days, found solace among the ancient tomes and journals. Her fingers delicately caressed the spines of countless books, seeking something, anything to dive into. Hidden amidst the books was an old leather-bound diary, its pages yellowed with age. Curiosity piqued, Elara carefully opened it. The elegant handwriting revealed it belonged to her great-grandfather, Albert Thompson. As she skimmed the pages, a particular entry caught her attention. It was dated several decades ago. It began, "Today, a decision was made." A decision that may forever cast a shadow over the Thompson name. Elara's heart raced as she read about her family's involvement with the rogue group of hunters that targeted werewolves. The journal detailed how they were deceived by the hunters, believing their cause was just. By the time the Thompsons had realized the truth, the damage was done. Her fingers trembled as she read about the incident that led to the death of a beloved werewolf mate. Darian's mate. The weight of her family's actions pressed down on her, the shame almost unbearable. Tears blurred her vision as she continued to read her great-grandfather's remorse and his futile attempts to make amends. The sound of footsteps broke her reverie. Eleanor, her mother, stood at the door, her face etched with concern and sorrow. "Elara," she began, her voice breaking, "you found it." Elara looked up, her blue eyes clouded with pain. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you keep this hidden?" Eleanor stepped inside, her gaze never leaving the diary. "We wanted to protect you. It's a burden, a legacy of shame that we hoped you'd never have to bear." Elara's voice trembled with emotion. "Protect me? By keeping me in the dark? I'm bound to a man whose heart I've unknowingly shattered." Eleanor approached, her hands reaching out to comfort her daughter. "We never imagined you'd be entangled with the Laurettis. We thought the past was behind us." Elara pulled away, her face a mask of anguish. "But it's not, is it? The past is very much alive, and I'm paying for a sin I didn't commit." Eleanor's eyes brimmed with tears. "I'm so sorry, Elara. If there was any way to undo the past, I would." A heavy silence enveloped the room, broken only by the soft sobs of a mother and daughter, grappling with the weight of a family secret that threatened to tear their world apart. As the evening hues gave way to twilight, the Thompson mansion was enveloped in a gentle calm. The impending arrival of the full moon cast a silvery glow, bathing everything in ethereal light. But for Elara, this was no ordinary evening. She felt it first as a whisper, a gentle pull at the base of her spine. As the night wore on, the sensation grew stronger, more insistent. Her heart raced, and her skin felt unusually warm to the touch. There was an energy, a latent power that seemed to stir within her, reaching out for something she couldn't quite grasp. Confused and a little frightened, Elara tried to shake off the strange feelings, attributing them to the stress of recent events. She decided a walk in the gardens might help clear her mind. As she wandered amidst the roses and night-blooming jasmine, the pull became even more potent. The silvery light of the moon seemed to beckon her, drawing her closer, its rays enveloping her like a lover's embrace. She felt her senses heighten. Every rustle of the leaves, the distant hoot of an owl, even the soft caress of the breeze against her skin felt magnified, as if she was experiencing the world in a way she never had before. Unbeknownst to her, Clara, her best friend, had been out for a late evening stroll and had chanced upon Elara's moonlit reverie. She watched, hidden by the shadows, as Elara tilted her face to the moon, her blue eyes reflecting its luminescence. There was a wild, untamed beauty about her that Clara had never seen before. Suddenly, Elara let out a soft, almost melodic howl, the sound echoing through the gardens. It was a sound of longing, of a soul reaching out to its destiny. Clara gasped, her heart racing. She had heard of such phenomena but never imagined she'd witness it firsthand. The full moon was known to have profound effects on werewolves, especially those who had yet to come into their powers. And now, it seemed Elara was awakening to her true nature. She wanted to rush to her friend, to comfort her, but something held her back. This was Elara's moment, a deeply personal journey of discovery. As the first light of dawn began to break, Elara, exhausted but transformed, made her way back to the mansion, her mind swirling with a myriad of emotions. She was still unaware of the profound change she had undergone, but she felt different, stronger. Darian, meanwhile, remained oblivious to Elara's nocturnal awakening. But fate has a way of revealing secrets, and it was only a matter of time before he would come face to face with the truth about the woman who was fast becoming an enigma in his life. The corridors of the Lauretti enterprises buzzed with rumors. Whispers about a sudden hostile takeover floated like wraiths, chilling the bones of everyone who heard. The target? Thompson Industries, the very lifeline of Elara's family. Seated in his opulent office, surrounded by the trappings of power and wealth, Darian Lauretti reviewed the final documents. A smirk played on his lips. With a swift, decisive stroke of his pen, he would cripple the Thompsons, ensuring their ruination. His golden eyes, usually enigmatic, now shimmered with a cold intensity. The pain of the past, the memories of a love lost, fueled his vindictiveness. By ensuring the Thompsons' downfall, he felt he was avenging his beloved, even though the rational part of him knew Elara was an innocent caught in the crossfire. Ares, Darian's closest confidant and right-hand man, hesitated at the door. "Are you sure about this, Alpha? This move will not only destroy their business but also the innocent lives dependent on it." Darian's gaze never wavered from the documents. "It's a necessary sacrifice." "But Elara," Ares began. "Is a Thompson," Darian interrupted coldly. "She is part of the legacy that brought pain and suffering into my life." James sighed, knowing there was no changing Darian's mind once it was made up. "Very well. The papers will be processed immediately." As the day wore on, the news of the hostile takeover sent shockwaves through the business world. Thompson Industries, a legacy built over generations, was on the brink of collapse. Employees, many of whom had given their lives to the company, were in a state of disbelief and panic. Elara, hearing the news, felt as if the ground had been pulled from under her feet. Her family's legacy, the very thing her father and grandfather had poured their hearts and souls into, was being ripped away. And the man behind it was the very one she was bound to. Anguish and betrayal welled up inside her. How could Darian be so heartless, so cruel? The realization that she was married to a man capable of such vindictiveness was a bitter pill to swallow. She confronted him that evening, her blue eyes blazing with fury. "How could you? How could you destroy my family?" Darian, ever the picture of cold detachment, met her gaze evenly. "It's retribution, Elara. Your family played a part in the most significant tragedy of my life. This is but a taste of the pain I've felt." Elara's voice trembled with emotion. "But I am your wife. Does that mean nothing to you?" For a moment, just a fleeting moment, Darian's mask cracked, and a hint of pain flickered in his eyes. But it was gone as quickly as it came. "You are a Thompson first, Elara. Remember that." With that, he turned on his heel and left, leaving behind a shattered Elara, grappling with the weight of his betrayal. The sprawling gardens of the Lauretti mansion were bathed in the soft glow of twilight. The evening seemed to hold its breath, sensing the storm of emotions that was about to unfold. Elara looked for comfort among the roses when her heart was heavy from sadness and betrayal. The scent, which used to make her feel better, now made her think of all the painful things in her life. As she walked, thinking, a shadow came up behind her. Its presence was strong and clear. "Darian," she whispered, her voice laced with pain. He stood there, tall and imposing, the golden hue of his eyes betraying nothing of his thoughts. "Elara," he began in a tone devoid of warmth, "I believe there are things we need to discuss." Taking a deep breath, she met his gaze squarely. "Why, Darian? Why are you doing this?" His lips curved into a cold smile. "I thought I made it clear. It's retribution." Elara shook her head, tears glistening in her eyes. "No. There's more. I want to hear it from you. I want to know why you married me, why you've brought this pain upon my family." Darian's eyes darkened, the weight of the past pressing heavily upon him. "You truly want to know?" She nodded, steeling herself for his answer. "You," he began, each word dripping with venom, "are the symbol of everything I lost. Marrying you, binding you to me, was the first step in my plan. I wanted to make you feel the same helplessness, the same pain I felt when I lost my mate." Elara recoiled, the force of his words hitting her like a physical blow. "So, our marriage, everything, was just a game to you? A means to an end?" Darian's laughter, cold and mocking, echoed in the stillness. "You were but a pawn, Elara. A means to hurt the Thompson legacy. And now, with your family's business in ruins, my revenge is almost complete." The cruelty in his voice, the absolute lack of remorse, shattered the last vestiges of hope she held. How can you be so heartless? She whispered. Because, he replied with chilling calmness, the heart I once had was ripped out when I lost Lyra. And now, I want the world, especially the Thompsons, to feel a fraction of the pain I live with every day. Tears streamed down Elara's face as the weight of his words, the depth of his hatred, crushed her spirit. I loved you, she whispered, her voice breaking. Despite everything, I believed in us. But now I see the monster you truly are. Without another word, she turned and fled, leaving behind a stone-faced Darian, whose heart, despite his cold exterior, ached with a pain he refused to acknowledge. The vastness of the Lauretti mansion had never felt more oppressive. Its once welcoming halls now echoed with the sounds of silence, each corner a testament to the chasm growing between Elara and Darian. Elara tried, she truly did. Each morning, she would approach Darian, a tentative smile on her face, hoping to bridge the widening gap between them. But every attempt was met with cold indifference or biting remarks. One evening, as they sat at opposite ends of the long dining table, the silence weighing heavily upon them, Elara mustered the courage to break it. Darian, she began softly, I know things have been difficult between us. But we are bound by marriage, by fate, perhaps. Can we not find a way to coexist? To find some semblance of peace? He looked up, his golden eyes devoid of warmth. Why? So you can play the doting wife while your family plots against me? Elara's heart ached. My family has lost everything, Darian. They have no power, no influence left to plot anything. Can we now let go of the past? His laughter was harsh, devoid of any real mirth. Let go? Every time I look at you, I'm reminded of the past, of the pain. You want peace? Stay out of my way. She blinked back tears, her voice barely above a whisper. I have tried, Darian. I've tried to understand, to reach out. But you push me away at every turn. He leaned forward, his voice dripping with disdain. Because every kindness from you feels like a knife, a reminder of the love I lost. You can never replace her, Elara. You will always be second best. The words cut deep, each one a dagger to her heart. She rose, her voice trembling with emotion. I never asked to replace her. I only asked for understanding, for a chance. But I see now that was too much to hope for. She left the dining room, the weight of their broken relationship pressing down upon her. Darian watched her go, a mixture of anger and regret churning within him. He knew he was being cruel, that he was pushing her away. But the pain, the memories, they were too much to bear. As the days turned into weeks, the mansion became a house divided. Elara and Darian moved in separate orbits, their interactions limited to terse exchanges or cold silences. The once vibrant home was now a mausoleum of lost hopes and dreams. Both were trapped in their own prisons of pain, unable to break free, unable to find their way back to each other. The grand study of the Lauretti mansion had seen countless meetings over the years, deals made, alliances formed, conflicts resolved. Today, however, it played host to a different kind of gathering. Darian sat, contemplative, behind his imposing mahogany desk. Opposite him, a figure, both familiar and unexpected, sat in poised silence, his grandmother, Isabella Lauretti. Isabella, despite her age, was a force to be reckoned with. Her sharp, piercing eyes missed nothing, and many in the werewolf community believed she possessed a wisdom that transcended generations. It was she who had been by Darian's side during his darkest days, guiding and mentoring him. Darian, she began, her voice carrying the weight of years, yet gentle, I've watched you grow, face challenges, and rise to be the alpha you are today. But this path of vengeance you're on, it's consuming you. Darian's gaze remained fixed on the patterns of the rug below. They took her from me, grandmother. I can't let that go. Isabella nodded slowly, understanding the depth of his pain. Revenge is a powerful motivator, my dear. But it's also a double-edged sword. Right now, it's not just hurting the Thompsons, it's hurting you. He looked up, his golden eyes meeting her wise ones. What would you have me do? Forgive? Forget? She leaned forward, her voice earnest. Not forget, Darian. But perhaps, reconsider. This anger, this bitterness, it's building walls around your heart. And in the process, you're pushing away someone who could help heal it. Darian's thoughts immediately went to Elara. The pain he'd caused her flashed before his eyes, the cold words, the rejections, the distance. Isabella, sensing his turmoil, continued, Elara is a strong, kind-hearted woman. She's faced the brunt of your anger, yet she's tried to understand, to reach out. Don't you see? In her own way, she's fighting for you, for both of you. Darian's voice was barely above a whisper. I've hurt her so much. Isabella reached across the desk, placing a reassuring hand over his. It's not too late, Darian. You can make amends. But first, you need to confront the pain within you. He looked into his grandmother's eyes, seeing the truth in her words. For the first time in a long time, Darian felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, there was a way forward, a way to heal. The sun cast a golden hue over the Lauretti gardens, bathing the flowers in a soft, ethereal glow. Elara, with a sketchbook in hand, sat on a stone bench capturing the beauty of nature. Drawing had always been her refuge, a way to express her emotions when words failed her. From a distance, Darian watched her, mesmerized by the grace with which her fingers moved, the dedication in her eyes. He recalled a conversation he'd overheard between Elara and Clara. Elara had expressed a desire to organize an art exhibition for young, budding artists in the city. The aim was to provide a platform for hidden talents and raise funds for local orphanages. Taking a deep breath, he approached her. Elara, he began, his voice tentative. She looked up, surprised. Darian, she replied, her voice neutral, guarding her emotions. I've been thinking, he continued, choosing his words carefully. About the art exhibition you want to organize. I believe it's a commendable effort, and I'd like to support it. Elara blinked, taken aback. You'd want to help? He nodded. Yes. The Lauretti Foundation could sponsor the event, provide the venue, anything you need. For a moment, there was silence as Elara processed his words. Then, slowly, a hint of a smile graced her lips. Thank you, Darian. That means a lot. He returned her smile, albeit hesitantly. It's a start, he murmured, more to himself than to her. As the days passed, Darian became more involved in the preparations for the art exhibition. He saw the passion and dedication with which Elara worked, her commitment to the cause. And for the first time, he began to truly appreciate the strength of her character. The day of the exhibition dawned bright and clear. The Lauretti ballroom was transformed into an art lover's paradise, with paintings, sculptures, and sketches adorning every corner. The event was a resounding success, not just in terms of funds raised, but also in the bridges it built between Darian and Elara. As the evening drew to a close, Darian approached Elara, who stood overlooking the art pieces. You did well, Elara, he said, genuine admiration in his voice. She looked up at him, her blue eyes shining with pride and gratitude. We did well, she corrected gently. A week had passed after the art exhibit. The once vibrant halls of the Lauretti mansion were now shrouded in an eerie silence. Servants whispered in hushed tones, their faces pale with concern. The mistress of the house, Elara, had been struck down by a sudden and severe illness. No one knew its cause, but its effects were evident in the paleness of her skin and the labored breaths she took. Darian, though his face remained as inscrutable as ever, was a storm of emotion inside. He paced the corridor outside Elara's room, his golden eyes shadowed with worry. Every so often, he would stop and press his ear to the door, trying to catch any sound from within. Martha, the head housemaid who had served the Lauretti family for decades, watched him from a distance. She had seen many sides of Darian Lauretti over the years, but this was new. The usually composed Alpha, now frayed at the edges with concern. Inside the room, Clara and Eleanor were by Elara's side, doing their best to comfort her. Elara, though weak, tried to reassure them. It's just a passing ailment, she whispered, trying to smile. But Darian wasn't convinced. He had sent for the best physicians in the city, werewolf and human alike. When Dr. Hastings, a renowned werewolf healer, arrived, Darian ushered him into Elara's room, his demeanor demanding answers. Hours felt like days. As night fell, Darian sat in the dimly lit corridor, his head buried in his hands. Martha approached him hesitantly, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "She'll pull through, Master Darian. The young mistress is strong." Darian looked up, his golden eyes meeting Martha's. "I can't lose her," he whispered, the vulnerability evident. Martha, wise with age, nodded. "Then fight for her. Be by her side. Let her feel your strength." Taking a deep breath, Darian stood and entered Elara's room. He took a seat beside her, taking her frail hand in his. For hours, he sat there, whispering words of comfort, willing her to fight, to come back to him. As dawn broke, Elara's condition began to stabilize. Dr. Hastings, looking exhausted but relieved, informed Darian that the worst was over. "She's a fighter," he remarked. Darian, his heart lightened by the news, nodded. "Yes, she is." The mansion slowly returned to its usual rhythm, but the events of that night had changed something. Darian's icy exterior had cracked, if only for a moment, revealing the depth of his feelings for Elara. And while he may not have voiced them, they were evident to all who looked. Elara lay on the luxurious bed with a fever and a weak body. Her mind was a confusing maze of hard reality and fevered dreams that held her prisoner. Her heart, on the other hand, stuck to the words that Darian had said to her that cut like knives and left pain in her soul. Darian stood at the doorway, his imposing frame casting a long shadow across the room. His golden eyes, usually ablaze with authority and indomitable will, now flickered with an unfamiliar emotion as they rested on Elara's vulnerable form. He approached, his steps hesitant, and took a seat beside her, his hand reaching out to gently caress her burning forehead. Elara's eyes fluttered open, her voice a mere whisper, "Why are you here?" Darian, caught off guard by her question, took a moment before responding, I cannot let you suffer alone, Elara." A bitter laugh escaped her lips, mingling with a sob. "But isn't this what you wanted, Darian? To see me in pain, to watch me crumble and break?" His hand, which had been gently stroking her hair, stilled. He could see the pain in her eyes, pain that he had caused. And in that moment, something within him shifted. "No, Elara," he whispered, his voice barely audible, "I never wanted this. I wanted you to hurt, yes, but seeing you like this, it tears me apart." Elara turned her head away, unwilling to let him see the tears that threatened to spill. "You have succeeded, Darian. Your words, they haunt me, they break me. But I will not give you the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart." Darian gently turned her face back towards him, his fingers lightly tracing her jaw. "Elara, She interrupted, her voice firm despite her physical weakness. "No, Darian. Your words, they have shown me who you truly are. A monster, heartless and cruel." He flinched as though he had been slapped, his eyes darkening. For a moment, he looked as if he would retaliate, his body tensing. But then, he visibly relaxed, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "You are right, Elara," he admitted, his voice choked with unshed tears. "I am a monster. But even monsters can love, can't they?" Elara stared at him, taken aback by his confession. Darian, the mighty Alpha, was breaking before her very eyes. She saw, for the first time, the man behind the beast, vulnerable, broken, and impossibly human. Word had spread that an unexpected guest had arrived, Zirkin, a cousin of Darian and an Alpha in his own right. A lavish meal was being prepared, and housekeeping staff were busy keeping the mansion spotless. Elara, having heard about the visitor, was making her way to the grand hall when she heard a familiar voice, one that sent shivers down her spine and brought forth memories she had long buried. And where might she be? The lady of the house? She rounded the corner and came face to face with piercing gray eyes, eyes that she remembered from her childhood. Eyes that once shared secrets, laughter, and innocent dreams. "Zirkin?" she gasped, her voice filled with disbelief. Zirkin's stern face broke into a warm smile. "Elara. By the stars, it's really you." Without thinking, Elara rushed into his arms, hugging him tightly. The years melted away as they stood there, lost in memories of a simpler time. Darian, who had been conversing with a servant, caught sight of the reunion. His golden eyes darkened as he watched the intimate embrace, and a low growl rumbled deep within his chest. Though he trusted Elara, the sight of another Alpha, his own cousin no less, being so familiar with his mate stirred a primal jealousy. Breaking the embrace, Zirkin held Elara at arm's length, studying her face. "You've grown into a beautiful woman, Elara." She blushed, looking down. "Thank you, Zirkin. It's been so long." Zirkin's eyes twinkled mischievously. "Too long. But now that I've found you, I won't let you go so easily." Before Elara could respond, Darian's voice cut through the air, cold and authoritative. "Zirkin, what brings you here?" Zirkin turned to face Darian, his posture rigid. "Cousin," he greeted with a nod. "I was passing through and thought I'd pay a visit." The strain was clear in Darian's eyes as he looked back and forth between Elara and Zirkin. "It seems like you two already know each other." Elara, sensing the brewing storm, quickly intervened. "We were childhood friends, Darian. I haven't seen him in years." Zirkin smirked, his eyes never leaving Darian's. "Indeed. It was a pleasant surprise to find her here, as your mate." Darian's jaw clenched, but he kept his voice steady. "Yes, she is mine." The two alphas locked eyes, a silent battle of wills, while Elara stood between them, feeling like a pawn in a dangerous game. The days following Zirkin's unexpected arrival were filled with underlying tension. Elara noticed Darian's watchful eyes, always lingering on her and Zirkin, a shadow of jealousy evident in his golden gaze. It was a side of him she hadn't seen before, this possessiveness that was as intense as it was unsettling. One day, as Elara was exploring a quieter section of the mansion, she stumbled upon a room that seemed untouched by time. Dust covered the furniture, and the air was thick with the scent of old books. Curiosity piqued, Elara began to browse the shelves, her fingers brushing against the leather-bound spines. One book, in particular, caught her attention. It wasn't as grand as the others, but it had an aura of intimacy. Pulling it out, she realized it wasn't a book at all, but a diary. The name inscribed on the first page made her heart skip a beat, Lyra. As she leafed through the pages, Elara was transported into the world of Lyra, a world where she was deeply, irrevocably in love with Darian. They were both young. The words painted a picture of a passionate love story, filled with ups and downs, but always anchored by their love for each other. The entries leading up to Lyra's death were heart-wrenching. Elara could feel the depth of their love and the pain of their loss. The diary ended abruptly, its final pages filled with Lyra's love letters to Darian, words she never had the chance to share. Tears blurred Elara's vision as she closed the diary, a newfound understanding filling her heart. Darian's pain, his anger, his walls, everything made sense now. And in that moment, her heart ached for him even more than it did for herself. Lost in her thoughts, Elara didn't notice Darian standing at the doorway, his face pale, eyes wide with shock. He had come looking for her, worried when she hadn't joined him for dinner. But the sight that met him, Elara with Lyra's diary, was something he hadn't prepared for. She looked up, their eyes meeting, a world of emotions passing between them. Without a word, Darian turned and left, leaving Elara with the weight of a painful past and an uncertain future. Outside, Darian leaned against the wall and took deep breaths to stop his heart from beating so fast. He couldn't face her now, when the book made him feel so much pain. When he looked up, he saw Zirkin watching them from a distance with a face that was hard to figure out. The jealousy that had been simmering inside Darian now roared to life. He couldn't stand the thought of Elara, with her newfound knowledge of his past, seeking comfort in Zirkin's arms. He had to act, and he had to act fast. Darian spent the night walking around his large study, thinking about the memories that Lyra's book had brought to the surface. Every smile, touch, and secret that was whispered flashed before his eyes. He felt bad for treating Elara with such cold contempt and for letting his desire for revenge cloud his judgment. He looked out the window, and the yard below caught his attention. Elara stood there, lit by the soft light of the moon. She looked like she was from another world. Her silver dress sparkled, and her blue eyes looked like the night sky. Zirkin was standing next to her. His body language was protective, and his voice was soft when he talked to her. Something broke inside of Darian. It was unbearable to think about losing Elara and seeing her find comfort in Zirkin's arms. He had to make things right again. He took a deep breath and walked down to the garden with his heart beating. As he got closer, Elara turned and looked wary. Zirkin could tell that there was stress, so he left them alone. Darian hesitated, searching for the right words. "Elara," he began, his voice thick with emotion, I've been a fool. A blinded, vengeful fool. She turned away, her back straight. Why do you tell me this now? Because, he whispered as he moved closer, I can't stand the thought of losing you. Not to my past, Sirkin, or anyone else. Elara's eyes filled with tears, but she held his gaze. You've hurt me, Darian. More than you'll ever know. He nodded, swallowing hard. I know. And I'll spend every day trying to make it right. But please, Elara, don't close your heart to me. Not now, when I've finally realized how empty my life is without you. She blinked, a single tear rolling down her cheek. Why should I believe you? He took her hands in his, pressing them to his chest. Feel this, he whispered. It beats for you, Elara. Only for you. She looked up at him, her eyes searching his face. Promise me, she said softly, promise me you won't hurt me again. Darian pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. I promise, he murmured, sealing his vow with a gentle kiss. After each emotional exchange in the garden, Elara retreated to the solace of her room, her mind in turmoil. The words Darian had spoken, the intensity of his emotions, were a lot to process. But as she stepped into her chamber, closing the door behind her, a different kind of turmoil began to rise. She moved to the ornate mirror hanging on one wall and gasped at her reflection. Her usually deep blue eyes now bore a different shade, a silvery hue that shimmered and danced. But more alarming were the fragmented visions that played out in her mind's eye. She saw a majestic wolf, its fur as white as snow, eyes mirroring her own new shade, running through a dense forest. The vision was intense, filled with sensations of freedom, power, and an instinctual urge she couldn't comprehend. As the visions faded, leaving her breathless, her eyes returned to their normal shade. Elara sank onto her bed, her hands trembling. What was happening to her? Was she losing her mind? The only logical explanation she could think of was that these were somehow connected to the strange sensations she'd experienced during the full moon. Elara decided she needed to find answers. If Darian and his household held secrets, she was going to uncover them. She remembered Ares, the beta, mentioning the world of werewolves. Perhaps it was time to seek him out and demand explanations. But for tonight, she needed rest. She lay down, pulling the covers around her, hoping sleep would bring solace. But even as she drifted off, the image of the white wolf lingered, hinting at mysteries yet to be unveiled. The afternoon sun cast long shadows as Darian's sleek car pulled up in front of the imposing skyscraper, the headquarters of Lauretti Enterprises. Elara, wearing a tailored suit that subtly accentuated her elegance, stepped out, taking a deep breath to calm her nerves. She wasn't familiar with the world of high-stakes business, and this was her first official outing as the lady of the Lauretti house. As they made their way to the boardroom, employees bowed their heads in respect to Darian, giving Elara curious glances. She held her head high, trying to appear confident even though she felt like a fish out of water. The boardroom was already filled with executives, discussing in hushed tones. As Darian and Elara entered, conversations ceased, all eyes on them. Elara's gaze was drawn to a striking woman at the far end of the table, her fiery red hair contrasting with her pale skin. Her green eyes, however, held a hint of malice as they locked onto Elara. Candace, Darian acknowledged with a nod. Candace rose, her figure sinuous, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Darian, she purred, her gaze briefly flicking to Elara before returning to Darian. And who is this delightful creature? This is Elara, my wife, Darian replied, his voice firm. Candace's eyes flashed. Ah, the human bride, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. I must say, Darian, I'm surprised. An alpha of your stature settling for a mere human? Elara bristled. I may not belong to your world, Candace, but that doesn't make me any less deserving of respect. Candace laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. Respect? For a human who's managed to ensnare our alpha? Why? Darian's face darkened, but before he could speak, Elara stepped forward. Because I am his chosen mate. Whether you approve or not is irrelevant. Candace's face contorted in rage. Do you even know what it means to be an alpha's mate, little human? The responsibilities, the power, the lineage? You're out of your depth. A deep growl emanated from Darian's chest, a clear warning. Before the situation could escalate further, an elderly man, with silver hair and kind blue eyes, stepped in. Enough, Candace, he chided gently. Turning to Elara, he introduced himself. I'm Elder Nathaniel. And I believe there's much you need to know, young one. The darkening woods felt colder than Elara remembered. She was hoisted onto a jagged rock, her hands tied behind her, the coarse rope cutting into her soft skin. The eerie cries of night creatures sounded distant, but what truly sent shivers down her spine was the silence of the wolves, lurking in the shadows, their eyes glowing menacingly. The moon, bathed in a soft silver glow, cast an ethereal light upon the scene, making it all the more surreal. Candace emerged from the shadows, her red hair gleaming like fresh blood, her eyes filled with malevolence. You really thought you could take my place by his side? Candace hissed, circling the rock, like a predator around its prey. Elara, despite her precarious situation, met Candace's gaze squarely. I have no interest in taking anyone's place. I only want to live my life without interference. Candace laughed, a cold, mirthless sound that echoed through the woods. Too late for that, dear. Darian is mine, and I intend to keep it that way. Before Elara could reply, a distant howl pierced the night, sending the wolves into a frenzy. It was a call, a signal. And Elara recognized it. It was Sirkin's. Moments later, the woods erupted into chaos. Wolves, massive and powerful, lunged at each other, their growls and snarls filling the air. Amidst the melee, two figures stood out. Darian, in his majestic wolf form, his golden eyes blazing with fury, and Sirkin, his silver fur reflecting the moonlight, both taking on multiple foes at once. Elara watched in horrified fascination, the violence below a stark contrast to the serene beauty of the moonlit night. She could see Darian, even in the midst of battle, constantly glancing up at her, ensuring she was safe. As the battle raged on, Sirkin, with a swift move, took down two wolves guarding Elara. Scaling the rock, he reached her, his human form now, and swiftly cut the ropes binding her. Are you okay? He asked, his eyes filled with concern. I am now, she replied, her voice shaky. Sirkin nodded, turning his attention back to the battle. Stay close, he instructed. The battle's direction changed quickly. Darian was dangerous because he was angry and worried about Elara. The enemy dogs left one by one, and their number kept going down. Candace, realizing she was losing, transformed into her wolf form and lunged at Elara. But Darian, ever watchful, intercepted her, the two alphas locked in a fierce combat. It was Sirkin who ended the standoff, his powerful form slamming into Candace, sending her sprawling. The woods grew silent once more, the enemy wolves defeated or fled. Darian, reverting to his human form, approached Elara, his golden eyes softening. Are you hurt? He asked, his voice raw with emotion. Elara shook her head. Thanks to you and Sirkin, I'm unharmed. Darian pulled her into a fierce embrace, burying his face in her hair. I'll never let anyone harm you, he vowed. The woods, once filled with the haunting cries of combat, now echoed with the panicked whines of the retreating wolves from Candace's pack. The very ground seemed to shake with their hurried departure. Candace, her red fur stained with dust and specks of blood, looked around in growing desperation. Her pack, once her strength and her shield, now lay defeated or had fled, leaving her vulnerable. The weight of her decisions pressed down on her, and for a fleeting moment, she looked every bit the trapped animal she was. In her panic, Candace's eyes fell on Elara, the root of all her problems. With a growl, she lunged at the seemingly defenseless human, her jaws open wide, ready to deliver a fatal bite. But what happened next was something no one, not even Darian or Sirkin, could have predicted. Elara, her blue eyes now glowing an intense shade, stood her ground. As Candace came closer, an invisible force seemed to emanate from Elara, pushing the wolf back. Fear, raw and potent, filled Candace's eyes as she skidded to a stop, her aggressive stance replaced by one of submission. Around them, the few of Candace's wolves that had stayed behind, sensing this shift in power, turned tail and fled, their loyalty to their alpha overridden by their primal instinct for survival. From the surrounding woods, the members of Darian's pack emerged, their forms sleek and powerful. They surrounded their alpha and Luna, protective and watchful. Darian, his golden eyes wide with shock, looked at Elara, trying to understand what had just transpired. What? How did you? He stammered, lost for words. Sirkin, equally stunned, stepped forward. It's her aura, he whispered in awe. She's projecting an alpha aura. It's rare, but it happens when a true alpha feels threatened. But Elara is a human. Elara, still trying to comprehend her own actions, looked at her hands as if seeing them for the first time. I don't know how I did that, she admitted shakily. It just felt right. Darian pulled her close, his gaze intense. We need to understand this, don't think too much about it now, he murmured. Do you feel any pain? Darian asked while scanning her body. The events of the night had sent ripples through the werewolf community, and now they stood, watching, waiting. Elara's heart raced, the weight of hundreds of eyes on her, yet a newfound strength surged within her. The world around her seemed sharper, clearer, and the scents and sounds were magnified tenfold. A cold wind brushed against her, sending a chill down her spine. The moon, in its full glory, hung low, casting silvery beams that danced on the leaves. And then, as if heeding an ancient call, a change began in Elara. Pain coursed through her, but it was a transformative pain. Her bones shifted, her body contorted, and her senses heightened even further. Her clothes tore away as fur, white as the purest snow, sprouted all over her. Within moments, where once stood Elara, now stood a magnificent white wolf. Darian and Zirkin, having witnessed many transformations, were left in awe. This wasn't just any wolf, this was an alpha wolf, a vision of purity and strength. Yet, before anyone could react, a deeper, more powerful growl filled the air, silencing everyone. From the shadows emerged a massive wolf, its fur a deep shade of gray. It was the alpha of Candace's pack, a wolf known and feared by many. His gaze settled on Elara, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. The imposing wolf approached Elara, sniffing her, circling her, and then, in a voice that was a mix of a growl and a whimper, he whispered, "Lyra?" Darian's heart stopped. Memories of a time long gone, of love and loss, flooded his mind. "Lyra?" He echoed, disbelief evident in his voice. But the alpha wasn't listening. Tears formed in his eyes as he continued to circle Elara. "Lyra, my daughter, my lost child," he murmured. Elara, despite her wolf form, seemed to understand. Memories, buried deep within, began to surface, memories of a time long forgotten, of a life once lived. The atmosphere was tense, filled with raw emotions. Candace, realizing her grave error, stepped forward, her eyes wide with shock and realization. "Father, she can't be Lyra." "Lyra is dead," she stammered, trying to convince herself more than anyone else. The alpha looked at Candace, his gaze cold. "You always were jealous of her. But know this, nothing can extinguish the spirit of an alpha. She has returned." Candace, realizing the weight of her actions, slunk away, her tail between her legs. "It's not possible," she whispered. The woods had seen many events, many tales, but nothing quite like this. The air was thick with anticipation, and every wolf from both packs stood still, their eyes fixed on the magnificent white wolf that was Elara, or Lyra, depending on the memories you held. Darian approached her slowly, his golden eyes searching her blue ones. The last time he had seen those eyes, they had been filled with love and laughter. Now, they held a depth of wisdom, pain, and a hint of recognition. He circled her, much like the other alpha had, trying to find a trace of the Elara he knew. But every step, every gesture, every tilt of her head screamed Lyra. His heart was beating fast and his mind was a mess of feelings. Could that be true? Could fate have been so kind as to bring back to him the woman he had lost? He carefully walked up to her and gently nuzzled her, trying to comfort and understand her. The wolves around them began to howl, a chorus that resonated through the forest, acknowledging the union of their alphas. Darian, in his wolf form, led Elara to the highest point, a rocky outcrop that overlooked their territory. Here, in front of their pack, they stood united, two alphas, two lovers, two souls bound by destiny. Darian transformed back into his human form, his golden eyes never leaving Elara. "Lyra," he whispered, his voice filled with disbelief and wonder. "Is it really you?" Still in her wolf form, Elara looked at him with tears in her blue eyes. She also changed, and when she stood in front of him, she looked both weak and strong. "It's me, Darian," she said with a soft voice. "I don't know how it happened or why, but it's me." The grand hall of the Lauretti mansion had seen many gatherings over the years, but none quite as significant as this one. A long table was set in the middle, adorned with golden candelabras and vases of white roses. Every seat was occupied, and the atmosphere was filled with a mix of tension, curiosity, and hope. At the head of the table sat Darian, with Elara, or Lyra, to his right. Opposite them were William and Eleanor Thompson, looking both proud and apprehensive. Beside Darian is his family, his grandmother and Zirkin, their eyes fixed on Elara with a mixture of disbelief and joy. And next to Elara were members of her birth family, the very pack she had been taken from. The room was silent for a moment before William cleared his throat. Many years ago, he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion, we found a young girl in the woods. She was unconscious, her clothes torn, and she had a deep wound on her shoulder. Around her lay the bodies of several wolves, and we later learned they had been attacked by a pack of rogue wolf. Eleanor took over, her eyes filling with tears. We took her in, nursed her back to health, and when she woke up, she remembered nothing of her past. She had no memory of who she was or where she came from. We named her Elara and raised her as our own. A heavy silence filled the room as everyone processed the information. Elara's biological family exchanged glances, the weight of their loss evident in their eyes. Darian's mother, a regal woman with the same golden eyes as her son, spoke up. You did a kind deed, Eleanor, William. It was fate that you found her, and fate that has brought her back to us. Darian's gaze never left Elara's. I lost her once, he said, his voice filled with emotion, and I thought I'd never see her again. But now, she's here with me, and I will never let her go again. Laughter and tears, stories and recollections were shared as the banquet progressed. Elara's, or Lyra's, miraculous homecoming was hailed by the two previously unrelated families who had become close through their shared affection for her. Darian and Elara finished the night dancing under the stars, their bodies moving in sync and their spirits joining together for all time.